Good afternoon, my friends. Lovely to have you back, and welcome back to this Gwent basics video. We're going to look at the 5 starter decks that you get in Gwent Homecoming. This is aimed at beginners because non-beginners will be able to move away from those quite quickly. I want to look at what cards are in there, explain some of the more important ones for you, look at card combos, look at the overall strategy that you want to try and achieve when you're playing that deck as well. Now, before I do that, I think I want to try and set the foundation because you're possibly beginners, and also look at any commonalities that we have between all of the decks. So things that are common that you should look out for, or things that you should be doing in general. And I also want to rank the starter decks for you quite early on so you can get an understanding if you just want to start playing. So there are 5 factions in Gwent. We've got the monsters, which is the red one. Northern Realms are sitting in blue, Skellige in green, Skellige in purple, and Nilfgaard in black. Now, to rank them in order of how I think they are in best to worst, if you just want to start playing, I think the Skellige one is probably the best. Their leader card will get high value and synergizes well with a couple of cards. They've got some bronzes which are worth a lot of value against other starter decks because they can't be removed easily. And you've also got ones which have good flexibility, so you can sort of switch it up depending on what opponent you're facing. Next up, Northern Realms actually. Their leader card again synergizes well with a couple of the cards that you have in the deck and actually provides decent value for them. You've got an overtuned bronze, which is nice, and in general, pretty nice to start with as a starter deck. Next up is monsters. Your leader card again synergizes with one card in your deck, but it does feel like you're losing value, or the potential that the leader card could provide is not really here for the starter, so that's unfortunate. You do have a couple of bronzes which work well together, which could net you a few points. Skellige is the next one. The leader card will get decent value, but it's nothing too amazing. And a lot of the bronzes are not too great. They can be countered by the opponent if they start playing onto the ranged row. And finally, Nilfgaard. Their leader is one of the better leaders in the pack, but he has no synergy whatsoever with the cards in the deck. Which is unfortunate, and a lot of the Nilfgaard cards are not very good, especially since you'll be playing other starter decks. Until people start getting stronger cards, your cards will be kind of weak as well. So now I've ranked them from best to worst. However, on the other side, I do think Nilfgaard here is probably one of the better decks. Like I said, his leader card is very good. If you craft a card that synergizes well with the leader, then this deck will definitely bump up in points quite quickly. Because the leader is a powerful one, you just need something to synergize with it. And the same goes for the monsters one. Eredin can work here, but you lose some value from it. However, if you craft a card that synergizes well with the leader, turns into a round-winning leader. So it's a really good deck if you start crafting small amounts of cards for it. Now, moving on to some of the common things between the decks. A lot of the decks use the same cards, neutral cards that can be put into any deck, and a lot of the decks are really similar to each other. So here we've got the monster deck, and this is what a deck will look like. You've got your leader card, and you've got all your cards down here. Okay, golds you can only have 1 copy of each, and bronzes you can have 2 copies of each. Every deck must have 25 cards in minimum, but you can go over, although not recommended. And you must make sure you don't go over the provision cap. So we've used 150 out of 165. So we've still got a bit of leeway. When you open a good card from a keg or card pack, you can switch out it for another one, which is really good. Every card has a provision cost down here, okay? And that's the provision cost to put in your deck. So, like, this is the monster starter deck, and a lot of the cards are similar to other ones. Every starter deck will have Eskel, Vesemir, Lambert, Bone Talismans, Thunderbolt Potions, Prize Winning Cow, Owl's Thunder, Swallow, Elder Bear, skip these 2, Wolf Pack, and Peasant Militia. All of the starter decks have those, so we've really only got a handful of cards which are specific to each deck. In this case, it's Werewolves, Arrakis Nest, Ghoul, and Ozrel, as well as your leader. So these are going to be the primary cards which differentiate the starter decks that we really need to look at later. The next thing you should be generally doing is playing onto the ranged row more often, unless you can't help it. The reason for this is there's cards like this exist in starter decks. The On-Crate Warrior. On deploy, damage an enemy by 2. If this unit is played from the graveyard, damage an enemy by 4. And it has a reach of 1. So Obviously, if you're playing this card, you want to get this 4 damage because it's good value. Then it turns into a nice 7 strength bronze, which is good. But it only has a reach of 1, so the reach is the distance in rows that you can target. So if I place mine on the melee row here, it can reach 1 row above it onto their melee row. So if my opponent is placing his cards onto the ranged row, that card you saw can never actually reach it. So you should always be trying to play your cards on the ranged row to try and avoid those particular cards that we saw. And several factions have cards like that which do a lot of damage but have only a reach of 1. Every starter deck has the prize winning cow. This is a 1 strength unit which you place onto the board and has the order to transform into a chort, which is a 10 strength unit. Now an order is an ability triggered manually by the player, and cards with order cannot be used on the first turn they are placed. So when you place this down, it's going to be vulnerable for 1 turn. The opponent could kill it. So there's 2 ways to go around this. First of all, you should always save some removal for the prize winning cow if you haven't seen it yet in a game, so you can actually remove it. Some factions are better at protecting it than others. Monsters, they can protect it easily, and Northern Realms can protect it as well. Okay, but you should try and save some removal for it if you haven't seen it and you're not against those 2 particular factions. And also, all starter decks start with Lambert, Vesemir and Eskel Witcher trio. This is a nice 12 points. Don't go blowing this straight away. Try and save it for round 3. In fact, you should save your mulligans to deal with this card and get rid of duplicates that you get in your hand. So if you get this and that, you need to get rid of these 2. Generally speaking, you should be probably saving most of your mulligans for these to just make sure you get rid of them. Try and save them for round 3. If you get into round 2 and you want to sort of try and bleed out your opponent play cards because they can't pass, then try and bleed these out. These are worth going 1 card down for with beginner decks, so if he plays these and you've still got yours, then you're in a really good position. So the final thing I wanted to talk about in terms of commonality is that none of the starter decks have any way to remove weather, hazards, or artifacts. So if you're crafting new cards, artifacts basically won't be removed, so you can get some really powerful ones of those, and weather hazards will also not be removed. And hazards do counter certain things, like the prize winning cow that is immune. Hazards do hit immune units, so if you get some frost, then you'll actually be able to counter the monster's prize winning cow. Okay, so we're going to look at the starter decks now, and we're going to start with the monster starter deck first. So this is the monster starter deck, and our leader card is Eredin. Okay, and the leader cards are going to be the things which differentiate most primarily between all the other starter decks. So Eredin has 3 mulligans. Okay, so you can redraw 3 cards. That's a nice amount, which is pretty good. He has the ability to boost a unit by 4 and give it immunity. So this is only worth 4 value, but it also protects a unit, which is really nice. This is a really good leader card, but it doesn't synergize too well with the cards that are actually in the deck. Okay, immunity means it cannot be targeted. You can still kill it with Area of Effect or something like that, but no one has that in the starter decks. So what cards are good to immune in this deck? Not really many, to be honest. No. Prize winning cow is one, and there's nothing else. So the prize winning cow is really the only target worth immuning. Basically, you put this on the board and then you make it immune. That means no one can kill it, which allows you to transform it into a chore for free. So there's no risk to you. And that's primarily what you need to use your leader card for. However, because you give it +4 strength, when it transforms, it will lose that +4 strength. That's why the leader card feels a bit rubbish in a way, because you are not getting the maximum potential from it, because you'll lose the strength even though you gain the transform safety. Now, again, I mentioned about Eredin being one of the best leaders when you craft a good card. If you get a card which synergizes really well, like Imler Sabbath or something, then he becomes really good very quickly. In the starter deck, he's okay, but not great. Next up, we've got Arrakis Nest. This spawns 4 1-power Arrakis drones, and while this is okay, it actually does combo really well with the Bone Talisman, which boosts all allies by 1. So you could play 2 monster nests and get 8 units on the board very quickly, and then boost all allies by 1. So this becomes an 8-power card. So there's a little bit of synergy there. It's not amazing, but it's reasonably good. So the next thing is ghouls here, and we also count Osrel because it does very similar things. It consumes a unit in your graveyard, so that's eat a unit and boost by its power. So we're looking for things with high strength. Okay, and then this becomes a really good. This has the potential to be a really good card. Just unfortunately in the starter deck, there's nothing with too high a strength that makes this an amazing card. It just becomes an average card. Okay, so we're looking for things for high strength. So this silver number is the strength 2, 1, 4, 4, 4. Not too good. Special card 1. Special card 5. Special card 4, 2, 2. I don't know why I like that rhythm. So 5 is really one of the strongest things in your deck, which makes the ghoul okay, good value, 6 strength, but it could be a lot more. It could be way better. Now the prize winning cow is a nice one, because although consuming 1 strength is really bad, if you manage to transform it into a 10, that ghoul becomes an 11 strength bronze. So it's really important to get the prize winning cow. You're going to be using your leader card to keep it safe, and then, you know, when you transform it, when it goes into the graveyard, the ghoul will be able to eat it for a 10, becoming an 11 strength. So that's one of the primary combos for your particular deck. Now, obviously, if you craft cards in the future, there's just massive cards. You know, this one's got 13 strength. That really improves the ghoul. I'm not saying this is a great card to craft, but you can see how later on we want stronger units if we want to get those ghouls to be really, really strong themselves. Okay? And if your opponent does the same strategy, use your Osrel to eat their Chort from their graveyard. Okay, so the Squirtle starter deck, we've got the leader card Philovendril. This boosts all units in your hand by 1. So, like, you are going to have some special cards, so it's probably going to be about 7 or 8 cards, hopefully. You don't have to use it in round 1, because you will probably get maximum hand size in other rounds as well. But it's going to really provide good value, and there are some targets that you really want it to hit. So I'll go over those in a moment. It's got 4 mulligans. That's a very healthy amount. You've got a lot of choice there, which is really good. So because it boosts all units in your hand by 1, there's a couple of really nice targets that you want it to hit. Sheldon Skaggs is one of them. When you play him, it damages an enemy by this unit's power. So it's 2, so at the minute it's only a 4 value. If your leader card hits it, it becomes 6 value because it will be 3 damage by 3. While this is not a great card from that particular number, 6 strength, 6 value for a gold is not too good. This is a card which is a very good card. You'll probably be keeping this card in most of your Squirtle decks. It's just that we don't have any way to buff it in hand to make it actually exponentially better. There are cards you can craft which buff in hand, which makes this card really very good. The other card which the leader is good for is the Mahakam Defender. Every turn on turn start, you boost self by 1 if this unit is already boosted. So if I place it on the board just like this, it's not going to do anything. But if I've hit it with my leader boost, then it now starts boosting by itself. And while the opponent can hit it to get rid of the boost so it doesn't boost anymore, we can start using things like swallow potions to boost up by another 6 to make sure it is boosted and gets maximum value. And at 5 strength to start with, or 6 to start with, it's pretty hard to remove. There aren't any starter decks that can do that much damage, so this is a really nice card to get value over time quite easily. Next up, we've got the Doblefana Archer. A nice flexibility, to be honest. It's 5 value. You can either place it on the melee row and do 2 damage, or you can place it on the range row and do 1 damage 2 times. And that will really counter the monster Arrakis nest that we saw that spawns loads of 1 strength units. So you can kind of use the flexibility to counter some opponent strategies there. And finally, the last specific Squirtle card in this deck is the Vryhead Officer. You place it on the melee row and damage an enemy by 3. Could be used to remove certain cards which haven't used their orders. That's very cool. But if you place them on the range row, you boost an ally by 3. Now, there's not many allies that you'd like to boost. That's going to be your primary one to make sure that it remains boosted so it gets its own boost. Now, in this Squirtle deck, you don't have any way of protecting the prize-winning cow like the monsters did by keeping it immune. So primarily you're going to be using the Thunderbolt potions a turn before. Place the cow on your next turn and then boost the cow a couple of points so it's safe from removal, and then transform it. Now you will lose the boost when you do that, so it's kind of not a great synergy really. So for the Northern Realms deck, we've got our King Foltest leader card. He's got 4 mulligans, which again is a very healthy amount, very nice. He's got the ability to boost an ally by 1 and give it Zeal. And you can do this 3 times in a game. So Zeal is an order ability, can be used on the same turn that it is placed. Okay, and he's got a couple of good targets for that. He's only going to be worth 3 value, but added safety is basically what you're going for here. So first of all, we've got the prize-winning cow. Normally he would be vulnerable, but now you can place the prize-winning cow, use your leader, and transform him immediately. So there's no risk whatsoever. You should be using your leader card on the prize-winning cow, definitely. The next card is the Adarian Mauler. This is a 3 strength bronze, has the order to damage an enemy by 4. So again, this is a really strong card. This is worth 7 value for a bronze. That's pretty high. So your leader card should be primarily going on these as well. Again, your leader card has 3. You can use it 3 times. So 1 for the prize-winning cow and 1 for 2 of these if possible. Now it does only have a reach of 1, and I mentioned this earlier. So if they start playing loads of stuff onto the ranged row, this is not going to be a good card. So they need to have something on the melee row for you to be able to hit it with this. But this is a really strong card, very powerful bronze. So your leader card should go onto this if possible. You do have 1 other target. It's not as good though, but the ballista is 4, and it damages an enemy by 1, and it can use it once. It does have a reach of 2, so you can hit anything no matter what row they're on. So you could use your leader card to make this use it straight away. Okay, the order can be used straight away. Obviously, I think the other guys are better, but they're obviously more risky if they don't have stuff on the melee row, and you won't draw everything. So you lose your leader card on the prize-winning cow, Adarian Maulers, and the ballistas. They're all of your targets to use. The next card that we're going to look at is the Kaedwani Sergeant. This has Zeal by itself, so you can use this immediately, and it boosts an ally by 1. It can do it twice, so it's worth 5 value. It's okay. You've got nothing really that you worry about on this. And finally, the last Northern Realms specific card is Ronvid the Incessant. When you first play him, he boosts South by 5. When he goes to the graveyard, whenever you play a soldier, you summon this unit from the graveyard to a random row. So you can get an extra 1 point by playing soldiers in each round. Now, soldier-wise, I think we've only got 2. We've got the Adarian Mauler. You can tout soldier by this little tag up here. And we've also got the Kaedwani Sergeant. There are only soldiers, so we've got 4 soldiers, because we've got 2 of each. So try and keep 1 of those for each round that you intend to play in. Round 1, round 3 usually. Okay. And that's it for the Northern Realms deck. Nice deck, he has some good synergies, gets things off nice and safely, which is pretty good. Next up, we've got the Skellige starter deck. Our leader card, 4 mulligans, nice and healthy. He has an order to damage a unit by 1, and he has a cooldown of 2. So you'll draw 10 cards to start with, and then you'll draw 3 in round 2 and 3 in round 3. So that's 16 cards, so 16 turns. So cooldown of 2. You get about 8 value from this guy from the entire game. So it's about 8 value, which is nice. It's about the same as Filavendrel, but it is a lot slower. So you can't do a big like tempo play or anything like that with him. He has some synergy. What you should be using this 1 damage pings on is primarily to help Donna on Hindar. He does 2 damage when you play him, but if the enemy has a number of damage units for 2, Bloodthirst 2, okay, number of damaged enemy units required to trigger this ability, he damages by 5, and that's really powerful. So you should ideally be trying to damage enemy units to get that triggered, and you should use your leader card to just ping certain enemies to get the Bloodthirst triggered. Now, damage means that this is base strength, okay, normal strength. If it's boosted, it goes green. If it's damaged, it's in the red. Okay, it's below this base strength. If it's boosted to 10 and then it's damaged to 9, it's still boosted because it's higher than its base. Okay, the damage is anything lower than its base. Primarily, your leader card should be to try and get this trigger to make him worth more value. Next up, we've got the On-Crate Warrior. I talked about this earlier. It damages an enemy by 2, and if you play it from the graveyard, damages an enemy by 4. It's a really strong card when you've damaged an enemy by 4. It's worth 7 value, but again, only reach of 1. So if they start playing onto the range row, you're not going to get much value from this, so do be aware of that. However, you get to look about whether it's worth using it or not, because you'll be resurrecting it. So if they don't have anything on the melee row, just don't resurrect it, resurrect something else instead. You're obviously going to be using Freya's Blessing on those cards primarily. Play a bronze unit from your graveyard. Now, what's really nice is you get to choose, like I mentioned, if they don't have anything on the melee row, you don't resurrect that card. But if they do, then you resurrect that card for a high value. And the final card for Skellige is the Haymay Skald. When you deploy it, you discard a card from your hand and then draw a card. And that's really useful because we're not going to be able to get through our entire decks in these starter decks. So being able to discard something which is not very good and then drawing something else. Gives you a nice thinning, nice consistency, which is good. I mean, like, you can discard this card if they have nothing on the melee row, because then you will be able to attack them. So you can discard that and then try and go for something else instead. So I do like the Heimayskalds for a little added consistency within this deck. Now again, the prize-winning cow in Skellige has no protection, so you're going to primarily be using the Thunderbolt potion to place this down the turn before, place the cow, boost it up a bit so you can transform it and be safe with it. And finally, we have the Nilfgaard starter deck. Our leader card, Emir Maurice, only has 2 mulligans, so that's quite a severe low amount. You need to be very careful with it, very stringent. Don't use them very much. In fact, I would say don't use any of your mulligans until after you've played these. Okay, if you get more than one of these witches in your hand, you have to use a mulligan on it. Otherwise, you're wasting value. So save your mulligans for these until you've played them, and then you can mulligan what you want after that. Okay, now he moves a card from the battlefield to your hand and then plays a card. So we need something that's good to play again. So that's what we're going to be looking for. We've got Treason here, which is a Nilfgaard specific. Force an enemy unit to damage adjacent units by its own power. That can be quite strong. You probably only get about 8 value from it, because it's reliant on the opponent placing cards together. If they stack up on one row, on the range row possibly, then you could get decent value from this. But again, this is not a card that your leader card can replay, so that's unfortunate. There's no point replaying these witches. No point replaying the prize-winning cow, because when you transform it, it turns into a chort, and you can't get this cow back. You can't get 2 cows. And also, Nilfgaard has no way of protecting this like some other decks, so you'll have to use a Thunderbolt potion to protect it. And there's no point replaying the Elder Bear. Slave Infantry. It's 5 strength bronze, which is pretty good, and you transform an allied unit into a slave infantry, so another 5. And this is actually a pretty decent card. You want to transform a low strength unit into another 5. So our lowest unit is probably going to be something along the lines of Peasant Militia or the Wolf Pack. So these 2 cards are actually quite important. You play them, get their deploy value, and then you transform them into slave infantry with the slave infantry. Now your leader card could pick this up and then replay it and transform another card. It's not a lot of value, it's about 2 or 3. It's not that great to do, but this is going to be one of the primary targets that you'll pick up and replay. Next we have the Infiltrator. If you place them on the melee, on round end it shuffles it into the opponent's deck. So 4 is about average for a lot of these bronzes, so it's not really going to hurt them in the sense that it's really low value for them to play it, but it can stop them trying to get the prize-winning cow. It thickens their deck. Our thinning is not particularly that good, so it's a reasonable card to play, and you might as well stick it onto the melee row. I do believe it has to be on the board in order to shuffle it into your opponent's deck, so if they've got one of those on-crate warriors which do 4 damage, they can kill this, and so then it won't shuffle. So there's a risk reward there, and it's up to you whether you use it. So here we've got the Spotter, which is when you play it on the melee row, reveal a random unit from the opponent's deck and boost south by its power. Now this isn't very good, I don't think, because all of the star decks have got relatively low strength units. The highest is 5 and the lowest is 1, which is the prize-winning cow in this one. So its strength is between 2 and 6, and that's not amazing. It's going to be just average. Usually we'll hit maybe like 3 and 4s strength, so it's not a great card, and it's definitely not worth re-picking up with Emir. So in this particular deck, there's a lot of not really that good synergy. The primary thing you're going to go for is Peasant Militia Wolf Pack or a bad Spotter that's only 2 strength, and then transform it into a slave infantry to get more value for it. It does have some nice stuff. I did say before that the Nilfgaard deck I think is the worst deck, but this leader is really good when you craft something for him. So much like the monster one, if you can craft one card which is really synergistic with this leader, it'll really bump you up very quickly, providing you draw it. So bad starter deck, but very good leader. So just need to craft something to make it really good. Thank you again for watching this Gwent Basics video. I will be going into each of the starter decks and talking about what cards are good to craft for them, and also what routes you can take to branch off to proper archetypes later on. But stay tuned for more Gwent content, and I'll see you again very soon. Goodbye.